Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with My Hero Academia chapter 233. Have it right here. I got it. I'm ready. Alright, cool. So yeah, hey guys, hope you're having a pretty great day. This is going to be a pretty fun chapter to talk about. I'm going to tell you right now, my bias. I love this chapter. You guys know me. You know how I do. I love any chapter that gives us anything having to do with powers. And this chapter is like, man, it's the bucket load of powers. It's like the hidden grotto of powers. There's so much talk about powers here, and I'm so happy because we got so much clarifications. And it's also kind of tricky because there was something that if I had just gone with this chapter when I read it last night and just talked about it, I would have totally have missed it. And I'm really excited to show it with you, or to point out to you guys. I'm sure you eagle-eyed viewers, some of you, I'm pretty sure you probably caught it because usually you do. So very excited to show that off. I also read it through the comments. I want to let everyone know every comment that was on the video for last week, I read through all of them. I did not get to reply to all of them, but I read through all of them. I think the most interesting comments so far have been the ones who are talking about Reed Destro might not necessarily share the views of his organization. And personally for me, I feel like the people who are saying that just a little bit, it comes off a little bit naive, but at the same time, I'm saying it that Destro is compromised because, well, that's just how patterns in fiction work. So ultimately, I'm making that assumption based on past patterns from other series, which isn't really fair. Hero Academia could do whatever it wants. Like, just because I feel it's a low probability of Destro actually being better than, or not wanting the goal that the rest of his organization is chasing after, or like it's implied that at least one person in his own organization is pushing for, you know, just because I think that's a low probability doesn't mean it's impossible. So I want to say a thank you to the guys that pointed that out. H Magnum, I know that you were one of the main ones that was talking about it. Thanks for getting involved, and it's ultimately a really good point, even if I think it happens to just be a bit too idealistic. But hey, whatever, we disagree. We all have different experiences. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get into the chapter, man. This is so good. Like I was saying, I'm super biased. I think this chapter was amazing because it gives us so much to talk about. So, let's begin. We start with the first page. Now, most interesting thing in this first page, well, Twice. Twice is inherently very interesting. I like the solution that he came up with in this first page. That is, he's going to copy Toga and he's going to do a blood transfusion. That's really interesting. Now, because at that point, what I'm wondering is, okay, how weird is it if she's going to have fake blood in her body? Like, because we know that the copies can only take so much damage. Mind you, it's Twice Prime that's doing the copying, which implies that it's going to be able to take a little bit more of a beating. But it's still like, if Toga gets hit really hard when she has this blood in her body, is it just going to disappear? Is it just going to turn into sludge inside of her? But blood blood cells die all the time, right? Like, it gets recycled pretty quickly or something. Honestly, I don't know the biology. Well, I don't remember the rules for blood in general, and like how long is the lifespan of a red blood cell. I feel like it's super short. I'm pretty sure it's super short, but it's a funny thought. It's a funny thought. Like, because we know that things turn into sludge when Twice's thing is done, I do wonder, you know, hypothetically, what would happen if Toga, like, say, had an organ transplant and then someone hits her in the kidney and what happens there? Very interesting. I think it's a cool little solution, but I am like relatively concerned. This is a really cool application of the power, and I don't think that the Hero Academia author would think about it too hard. I still think it's really cool. What do you guys think about that? Please let me know. Oh, also, because we're kind of going to talk about it a little bit, the translations for this week between Manga Stream and J-Maney's box are not as egregious as last week. For this week, I'm going to just be showing you Manga Stream, just because I thought it was pretty nice. Now, the second page is where, like, things start getting good for me. So, you know, here's my thought process. I read the first panel with Twice saying that he wished he could have cloned her when she was still healthy, and then they were talking about, you know, we've already measured her as she was when she was damaged, and I'm just thinking, like, yeah, man, but how does that work? Like, I still don't understand. Why are there such differences? Can you not control the state of when things are happening? And then, you know, we go into the next little bit, which is just the nice little explanation of what is going on, and it's like, author, thank you. This is exactly what I wanted to know. So as we find out, Twice's double will always reproduce a target's appearance from the moment that the target was measured. But what I really wanted to know was the thing about the personality. And then we find out that the personality and the memories are updated based on the last time that Twice saw that person. I think Jimini's box said it was based on the last point of contact. And then you have like the little image of Twice touching Mr. Compress. That was pretty cool. So the important thing to take away from here is that we talked about this last time, like, is Twice's quirk doing the heavy lifting, or does it require Twice knowing the character's psychology? As we find out, it's the quirk doing the heavy lifting. So on one side, it takes away like any value that you could say that Twice knows his allies really, really well. If his quirk is doing the heavy lifting, that doesn't matter because the quirk updates by itself. So that gets taken away, but I think this makes the quirk so much more stable because that was a giant question. How does this work? What is the exact ruling? Does it require Twice being on Momo level of competent, or does the quirk just do it itself? So this is a really stable quirk. I think it's really nicely done. I think that was really good. I am so happy that the author put in that information. It makes the quirk feel like it's more, it covers more bases, it covers more questions. I really like this. Do you guys have any more questions about this quirk? Because so far I think that the Twice double quirk is pretty well designed. I really enjoy it. My biggest question so far, or my biggest concern, is just what happens when you copy something that has an innately short lifespan, like blood cells, or what happens if you use an organ and you put it inside someone else. Like that's the part that's getting me right now, but again, I don't think that the author is going to go into it. The next page is, the next interesting page is the page where Skeptic shows up, and I'm a little bit sad here, just a little bit. First, I like seeing how Skeptic makes a copy out of what I assume is a motorcycle, but what I'm really sad about here is that Skeptic is starting to break down. You can see he's repeating that this is not a failure, not a failure. It's unfortunate when this happens because this is effectively villainous breakdown, villainous decay. Skeptic has been caught up in something. He has an idiosyncrasy. Once you're playing this route, you're losing those rational villains and you're starting to create those kind of crazy villains. There's not a problem with crazy villains, but when it comes to writing, insanity is just an easy way to not have to explain things, or insanity is just an easy way to justify why people are making bad decisions. When you look at this man saying this is not a failure, this is not a failure, he's insisting that he hasn't failed. Do you as a reader really believe that he is not going to make mistakes in the upcoming fight? Like, be honest with yourself, because usually when you're having this character breakdown, things are going to just start getting a little bit harder for the character. It's going to get a little bit more unhinged. If Twice is going to get a victory, if Twice is the one fighting him, or if it's Mr. Compress, because Mr. Compress still has not arrived. If it's Mr. Compress fighting him, or anyone fighting him, are you going to be surprised if they're able to pull one over on him while he's getting obsessed about not failing? It's just, breakdowns are never really a good sign for villains unless they are so overpowered that the breakdown doesn't really influence the general results. But like, the League of Villains has shown that they can compete with these people on a whole other level. Like, these guys, like, reminder, are fighting many people at once and they have not fallen down yet, except for Toga. But like, generally the people who have been fighting a lot of the mooks have not fallen down. Heck, even Toga took down a giant body count. So it's just, that's one thing that I'm a little bit sad about, just because when you're going down this route, well, yes, it is kind of interesting to see a character breaking down. It's also just, I see insanity as a shortcut when it comes to justifying certain things in stories. I should say, like, instantaneous insanity. Like, it's not like the slow cooked insanities. Like, the insanities just happen after you turn a page. Those are the ones that tend to be a problem. And I shouldn't be calling it insanity either. I'm pretty sure that's a no-no word on YouTube, but you guys get it. It's just like the breakdown itself. Anyway, the next page is where we start Spinners. So that was the other thing that made me really happy about the chapter. Spinner is getting his little moment. I'm happy. All I need now is Twice. Oh, sorry, not Twice. Mr. Compress. I will sacrifice Dobby's screen time for this arc because Dobby seems like he has more things going on. I have no problem sacrificing it. But Mr. Compress, I hope we get Mr. Compress. Spinner getting his time makes me feel a little bit more confident. So one thing I want to say is that this first shot we got of Spinner in this fight with Twice in there, it was pretty awesome. I really liked it. I thought it just looked really good. One of the big things that you take away from this page when you're reading it is that Spinner is very attentive. He points out that he remembered what happened when Curious had been defeated. He knows what their relationship with their top brass is. It's absolutely important that we take that detail in because that informs us a little bit about Spinner. And then it gets justified, I think, in the next few pages. But before that, we have another little bit of clarity for Spinner's character, specifically that he's talking in gamer terms like Shigaraki does. Now, the big thing that to take away this, like it's all justified later when you find out he's a shut-in, but the big thing here is it just characterizes him more that he understands strategy thanks to games a little bit, and that's what he's ultimately telling the guy, or I guess the trumpet, that the buffers should stay in the back. That's just video game mentality. If you have a character who's able to buff other characters, you want to keep them safe in the same way that you would want to keep a healer safe in the back of the traditional RPG party. So that's what they're really talking about. So that was really cool. On the next page, it's pretty much the trumpet's reveal part. So the big thing here is that the trumpet's superpower, last time we compared it to Bello Betty from One Piece. She has the power to rally people. As we find out here, Trumpet also has the power to rally people, except like usual, One Piece's powers are not well defined. Hero Academia's powers are well defined. So I like the physics behind why it's happening. You know, just talking about the special electromagnetic waves and that if his voice is louder, the stronger the effect is. I love it. That's really cool. I'm into it. It's ultimately the same kind of power in terms of the end result, but I think the implementation for Hero Academia's is more robust. It's cool when they have these rules set to it instead of just the general vague terms that One Piece tends to do. So overall, I am very happy with this. I like the power. I like that we were correct when we were going down the Bello Betty route. This is pretty cool. I'm happy. So I think overall, and he also showed us a really cool little gear. Now the cool thing about the gear is how it like kind of manifests out of some bracelets. Man, Detner Rat technology that was pretty cool. Again, another great little bit of power exposition. I'm really happy that the author did it. So next page, you know, we continue with the powers, we continue with characterization. We find out Spinner was a shut-in. So the important thing there is that justifies the previous stuff that we saw in like the last few pages. You know, it justifies why he would know video game terms so well. It justifies why he was observant, because like again, as a shut-in, all you're doing is playing video games, watching TV. You end up, I think, you can justify why those people would be more observant in general, especially if they're playing strategy games, which I assume Spinner would have been playing. But again, that's an assumption. I think it's a solid justification. And we find out that Spinner's power is Gecko, specifically the ability to cling to walls. Now, me personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's pretty neat. Like the shot of Spinner sticking to the wall is pretty cool. And if anything, you know, there's other things that we have to keep in mind. Spinner has scales on him, so in some ways you can say his body is innately more durable than a standard human's body because, again, scales. And the other thing is, Spinner carries around, or has carried around, a giant sword made of knives and blades. A regular sword is already pretty heavy. Like a regular broadsword is heavy. And Spinner's swinging that thing around like nothing. Like, I think it's fair to say like Spinner also is slightly stronger than the average person. So, you know, it's all cool to make fun of Spinner's superpower here, but, you know, comparatively, he doesn't have the worst power in the world, right? Like, someone who can only produce bubbles is significantly underpowered compared to Spinner, is what I'm trying to say. That's just... I know, and like in the grand scheme of things, in terms of like the rest of the villains, it's like, you know, Spinner is not the most powerful thing in the world, but, you know, you gotta still respect that he's above average. Anyway, at this page, we also start a little bit of rhetoric about Spinner being worthless, and that kind of just builds into Spinner's inner monologue later. Okay, so the next page is them realizing that, oh crap, you know, the tower is falling. There's nothing really important in this page. But look at this character, man. Who is that? She looks so fabulous. Like, it kind of reminds me of Pearl from Steven Universe, like, honestly. Just with the pose and just the closed eyes and the upturned nose. I don't know, man. That might be a reference. Like, there's really no reason to have the upturned nose, the relatively short hair, the ballerina-like pose, and the closed eyes. If she had a gem on her face, then we know for sure, but she doesn't. Anyway, we move on. The next page is just the start of the Spinner monologue and the Spinner build-up. What are the important things in this page? It's just Spinner knows who he is. Spinner is also, as you can tell, he's relatively easily influenced, but although you don't really get that till the next page, where, you know, he's just showing how he saw what Stain had said and that motivated him. Given that Stain is a character, or I guess a plot device to motivate people, makes sense. And then you have him talking about Shigaraki, that he wants to see the future that Shigaraki envisions. At that point, when you see how he just jumps onto the other person, and Spinner does say himself, he's the kind of person who stands on the shoulders of others. You know, it just tells me that Spinner is ultimately a very easily influenced person. Like, yeah, you know, he has a pretty rough life, but at the end of the day, he gets easily swayed. I think that's one of the big things that you should take away from this. Once he says that he wants to see the future that Shigaraki envisions, i.e. the future of destruction, you know, it's like the character is relatively easily influenced. But again, like I think the value here is that he knows what he's about. He knows that he stands on other people's shoulders. He knows that he by himself can't really go far. So, you know, again, I do think easily influenced, but the justifications are solid and the character is self-aware, which I think ultimately elevate the character a bit. Now, before we leave this page, one thing I do want to say is that there is a theme that is popping up. When you look at Spinner's little line here, he goes with, that's who I am, what's wrong with that? Now, the reason I'm pointing this little line out is because this is kind of reminiscent of what Toga's thing was about. It's about Toga knows who she is, so what's wrong with that? She thinks she's normal. So again, this arc is largely a arc about the villains proving themselves to themselves, and proving themselves to the readers, and making that statement like, hey, this is who I am. So again, this is largely the villain exposition arc. This is the arc where you find out about the villains. And you know, every time we see this, you know, I wonder, are these villains really going to be the final villains in Hero Academia? Because at this point, they're all outcasts of society. And as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't be surprised if the Villain League, and I mean, you know, everyone that's in this arc right now in Shigaraki's group, what if they turn on All For One? What if All For One is the final villain and everyone turns on him? Because again, Shigaraki's situation with his backstory is at a point where I think the author could say, like, yeah, there was a lot of manipulation happening in Shigaraki's backstory. So, you know, whenever you have these characters really stepping up and really accepting themselves, it's like, if they go down the true villain route, you know, they're going to be memorable villains. They are worthwhile. But if they go down that route of redemption, I wouldn't be surprised either, because again, the author, I think, has laid pretty good foundations here. But we'll need to see, does the author want to have Shigaraki be the next All For One, or does he want Shigaraki and Izuku to team up? Does he want Izuku to save Shigaraki? We're still too far away to get any real conclusive evidence about that. Anyway, Spinner says some pretty nice words to Trumpet, and it sets up their fight pretty well. Now we move on to the next page, and we go to Shigaraki facing down the giant mayonnaise. And we are very deep into the video, so let's round this up. Alright, so the next little page is a lot of dialogue, and it's largely just Shigaraki taunting the man. Nothing really important on this particular page aside from the cool art. Now the next page is where things start to get interesting. So I'm going to show you this shot here of the foot. Initially, I had thought that this foot belonged to Redestro, but it doesn't. It belongs to Shigaraki. I would not have noticed that. Now, when you look at the foot, though, there's another little thing happening here where it kind of looks like there's decay propagating from his foot. When you look at just how the way the thing is kind of originating, it looks like there's a center point right where the foot is making contact with the ground. And, well, as we see, his shoes get destroyed. So, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's the author saying that, hey, yeah, Shigaraki can propagate this from his feet as well. When you look at the previous page, the propagation was spreading from his arms, and you can kind of see that there's a center point, there's an origin. But like that second page, it makes it look like the origin is right underneath the foot. So that's really, really interesting. I'm really curious, is that what the author is trying to draw there? And then you have the characters, in case we didn't notice, you have the characters pointing out that it's destroying things that Shigaraki isn't directly touching. I think this is just an issue of like, well, the propagation just spreads, so I feel like it makes sense. We've already kind of seen the mechanic before. I think we're in a good enough spot to say like, yeah, it makes sense. This page is the start of Ray Destro explaining to us what exactly his powers are. In this one, I think the thing that's most important to keep in mind, or the thing that's most important to note, is that Shigaraki, I'm pretty sure, loses one of his hands, and not like his actual hand, that comes later, but one of his family's hands. I can only imagine what kind of chaos that is going to cause. And then you have Shigaraki, of course, losing his hand. So this was actually kind of hard for me to tell what's going on in that shot. So from what I see, it looks like these 3 fingers got ripped off, and then he only has these 2 left. I think that's what it looks like. My big question is like, is Shigaraki more upset about his missing hand, or is he upset about his missing family's hand? Like, I feel like he'd be more upset about the hand that got destroyed from his family. Like, it looks like one got destroyed legitimately. Yeah, it looks like one legitimately did. Anyway, when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's a pretty good shot. And Shigaraki's face is amazing for it. But what I found interesting is just that this is kind of like karma. Shigaraki ripped off Shizaki's hands, and now look what happens. Shigaraki gets his hand kind of sort of ripped off. You know, what's going to happen in the future? Is Shigaraki going to get it restored? That's kind of where I'm leaning. Like, maybe Shigaraki's going to get it restored in the future. Well, again, you know, it's one of those things we'll have to see. He might just end up without a hand for a while. But if the feet are getting involved, Shigaraki has 2 new places to propagate from. So maybe at one point, you know, the guy's going to be holding Shigaraki up, and then Shigaraki's going to put his foot somewhere where it shouldn't be, and then, you know, maybe that'll... You know, the point is, I think that Shigaraki still has a way to fight, especially when you consider the final page of this chapter. Anyway, we're at the final page. So, 2 big things here. Of course, the first thing is superpower, stress. Hey, okay, if you notice something different, it's because I am recutting the video to make sure I can get this part about stress a little bit snappier. So stress as a superpower, I think it is solid. I like that we ultimately get an accumulation type quirk. I like how it links to the ink blots, because stress is very psychological. It has psychological effects, or it comes from psychological places. Like if you're worried about something, that's going to be building up your stress. I like it because the ink blots, you know, when you tell someone about psychology and you ask them to like tell you something about psychology and they don't know anything about it, they might point out the ink blots as like a psychological examination tool, something like that. So I like the connection between the ink blots on Ridestro's face and the concept of stress. That's solid. Like I said, having a simple power augmentation quirk, you know, we're now approaching, instead of having those really versatile quirks, we have a villain with a quirk comparable to All Might. And at that point, you like gotta start asking, well, okay, what's the ceiling on this superpower? You know, how strong does Ridestro get proportional to the stress? Can he get to All Might level where he can change the weather with a punch? You know, that's what I'm thinking when I see that it builds up power. Ooh, someone subscribed or something. Now, there is something that I'm seeing, or after reading this, there is something that has kind of shaken me a little bit. Because previously, in one of the previous chapters, you know, I said that Ridestro is just, he largely is just using the Liberation Army. Like, Ridestro is not a good person. But now with the introduction of stress, I'm kind of changing my mind a little bit. Like, I need to see a little bit more of his character. It's just because we're at a situation where, you know, we had him crying when he choked out his buddy Miyashita for dissing his father's organization, right? We had that moment. And, you know, like, I initially took that to be, well, this is just a marker of this guy's a zealot, this guy's insane. But now I might be changing my mind to, there might be a legitimate degree of care that Ridestro has in his organization. And I'm saying that because if I was Ridestro and I know that my superpower gets more powerful the more stressed out I am, I would make an effort to have a conscience. I would make an effort to care about people, because when those people get hurt or when something goes wrong, I'm going to get stronger from it because I'm going to care. You know, so like Miyashita, if that is his name, I forget his name, but you know, the guy with the little like bear ears. If dusting him made it so that Redestro lost sleep at night, that Redestro actually feels very guilty about it, then Redestro also made himself way stronger. Like, you know, does he feel bad for everyone that Shigaraki's dusted? Because if he does, that stress is going to build up. So I think the Redestro, if this is true, I would like to see the author give him a monologue to confirm this, because then with Redestro we end up having a villain who went out of his way to give himself a conscience, or to make sure he maintained a conscience and doesn't just see the Liberation Army as pawns. Because if you see them as pawns, you know, I think you could still get stress from it, from them failing, but the stress might not be as prominent as the stress that someone gets from, you know, the guilt of dusting a innocent person, or, you know, just the guilt that someone gets for like losing their valuable allies. So that's how I'm kind of thinking about Redestro now. But I really want to see the monologue to see whether or not the author is going to go down that route. Okay, now back to the rest of the video as it was initially recorded. And finally, the final panel is an earthquake, most likely coming from Gigantomachia, which leads me to the other thing. Redestro getting bigger might just be a mechanic also there to make the fight with Gigantomachia better. Because if Redestro is at the strength of Gigantomachia, you know, then we're going to be able to see what Gigantomachia's extents are. What can he do when you have like these two big titans? So, you know, I think it's also very interesting that Redestro ends up looking like a giant King Kong. Anyway, guys, my voice, I need to drink some water. I'm done. Guys, thanks so much for watching. This was a long video, but man, there was so much. The only unfortunate thing is that, well, next week is a break. But hey, I'll be here next 2 weeks. Let me know what you thought down below. Until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. And let me know if I missed anything. Anyway, see ya.